Longest government shutdown in history, but it only pays federal workers through mid-February, teeing up more uncertainty in the heated battle over the border wall. Good evening, I'm Mike Emanuel, in for John Scott. This is the Fox Report. President Trump signed the bill yesterday despite no funding for his proposed wall, which he previously said would be a non-starter. Mr. Trump now says Congress needs to put forth a good faith effort to craft new border legislation over the next 3 weeks. This as critics pounce on the president and accuse him of conceding to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The White House disputes that narrative.
100% no. The president stood up for the American people. He opened the government. We had Democrats from rank and file positions come to us and say, listen, we ran on safety and security. Our constituents don't think walls are immoral. They don't think locking their doors at night, protecting their own families is immoral. We are not we are not like Chuck Schumer. We are not Nancy Pelosi's puppet. When we heard that, we realized the dam was beginning to break on the Democrat side and we could get something accomplished. That's why the president decided to open the government and pay those hardworking federal employees.
We have Fox team coverage on this. Jeff Paul's in Los Angeles with the latest on the border. Jonathan Seri's in Atlanta following the shutdown's impact on air travel. But we begin this evening with Ellison Barber at the White House. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening, Mike. President Trump tweeted at least 9 times today, more often than not. He tweeted about the wall. Sources tell Fox News the White House was closely watching those dueling shutdown votes that took place in the Senate, both of which failed in the Senate, and that those votes were a factor in this surprise shutdown agreement. One source tells Fox News it was almost a jailbreak, with Republicans considering crossing party lines and supporting the Democratic plan far more than the 6 Republicans who ultimately did. White House officials say they agreed to this deal because in private talks, multiple moderate Democrats said they are willing to fund a physical barrier at the U.S.-Mexico border. Democrats in states that voted for President Trump are Democrats that flipped a House seat in the last election, and that official says that those Democrats are the ones that are key, the ones the White House is counting on moving ahead. At the same time, a White House official tells me they do not know how much influence those Democrats will have on the conference committee. That conference committee is a major part of the deal here. The government reopens for 3 weeks, no new border funding, but lawmakers selected by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will form a bipartisan conference committee and spend the next 3 weeks negotiating and putting together a Homeland Security package. Pelosi selected these members for the conference. 2 of the 6 are from states that President Trump won in 2016. Yesterday, as staffing shortages led to airport delays and federal workers braced to go home without a paycheck for the second time in a row, President Trump headed to the Rose Garden.
I will sign a bill to open our government for 3 weeks until February 15th. I will make sure that all employees receive their back pay very quickly or as soon as possible. It'll happen fast. I am asking Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to put this proposal on the floor immediately.
And just like that, the longest shutdown in U.S. history ended not with a bang, but more of a whimper. Critics say that Democrats got everything they wanted and that President Trump didn't get anything he wanted. The front page of a newspaper in the president's home state called him a caveman this morning. Conservative firebrand Ann Coulter tweeted good news for George Herbert Walker Bush. As of today, he is no longer the biggest wimp ever to serve as president of the United States. President Trump says this was in no way a concession. It was taking care of millions of people who were getting badly hurt by the shutdown, with the understanding that in 21 days, if no deal is done, it's off to the races. President Trump says he will declare a national emergency if no deal is struck. Mike?
Ellison Barber leading us off at the White House. Ellison, many thanks. With the stopgap spending bill signed, airports hope to get back to business as usual after the partial government shutdown brought on major flight delays due to a staffing shortage. But aviation analyst Mike Boyd says the lack of qualified workers is a problem that predates the shutdown.
They're so thin with air traffic controllers. What we saw this past week in New York and Philadelphia, probably in 3 years, that's may be the norm unless we get the Department of Transportation to do their job and hire more controllers, train them properly, and support them properly. That isn't in place right now.
Jonathan Seri is at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, where they are expecting hundreds of thousands of travelers to arrive next week when the city hosts the Super Bowl. Good evening, Jonathan.
Hi, Mike. In fact, city officials are anticipating the busiest travel day is going to be the day after the Super Bowl, when everyone tries to leave town at once. On that day, what they're calling Mass Exodus Monday, they're predicting 110,000 people will pass through the world's busiest airport, setting an all-time record high. So the end to the government shutdown, which caused these long lines that you saw over previous days, is welcome news. City officials glad to see it gone, at least temporarily. The TSA says it will bring in additional personnel from other parts of the country to help expedite the security lines during Super Bowl travel. After missing 2 paychecks, many TSA employees will receive full reimbursements within the next 5 days, although some may have to wait until February 9. That continues to put a strain on family budgets. Southwest Airlines opened a food pantry right here in the main terminal, which has been receiving donations from other airlines, an airport food vendor, and local food bank to help federal workers who are still feeling the after effects of the government shutdown.
It is not over, and even though they're going to reopen for 3 weeks, their struggle is real. This has affected not only the government worker themselves, but their family. So we're here to serve.
Throughout the country, some federal airport workers are expressing concern the temporary end to the shutdown is just that, temporary.
We're happy that our people, our officers, are going to get the paychecks that they've earned, that they've worked for, protecting the traveling public for the last month. We're also very concerned that this is only a temporary measure, that we could be right back here in the same situation 3 weeks from now.
And coming back to our live shot, you can see the TSA lines behind us. Not so bad. The airport estimating the lines at 15 seconds. Pretty typical for a Saturday, ordinarily a very slow travel day. But, Mike, I will bet you good money it will be a far different scene a week from today.
No doubt about that. Jonathan Serry in Atlanta, thanks very much. A new immigration policy now in effect along the southern border. The Department of Homeland Security now sending asylum seekers back to Mexico while their cases are being processed here in the U.S. There are some concerns, however, the move could result in more illegal smuggling attempts. Jeff Paul is live from our Los Angeles bureau with more. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Mike. The Trump administration announcing some asylum seekers will be sent back or have to wait in Mexico while their claim is processed. At the moment, this only applies to the San Ysidro Port of Entry in San Diego. That's the location where many from the migrant caravan have traveled to over the last few months. Now, previously, those who had credible claims were either detained for several months or released into the U.S. while they waited for a hearing. But now some will be sent back to Mexico or forced to remain there in Mexico while they wait for any developments on their immigration status. President Trump says something had to change with so many claims.
We have nowhere left to house them and no way to promptly remove them. We can't get them out because our laws are so obsolete, so antiquated, and so bad. Without new resources from Congress, we will be forced to release these people into communities, something we don't want to do.
Now, some are concerned about where and how these migrants will live while they wait on their claim, but there are fears it could drive people away from ports of entry. Some migrant advocate groups worry it'll force some migrants away from pursuing legal routes to the U.S., pushing them off to dangerous border cities to try to find a way in. Even the National Border Patrol Council, which has shown support for the Trump administration in the past, feels the policy could have unintended consequences.
DHS is just pulling some smoke and mirrors right now because I don't think it's a process that really is going to work. You're enforcing laws against people that are trying to do it legally, and you're also facilitating a way for them to try illegally. And that's where the problem.
Unaccompanied children and the disabled will continue to receive shelter. And while at the moment this is only applying for the port of entry in San Diego, others could see it on other points of entry. The Mexican government says it doesn't agree with the move, but it will continue to take care of those asylum seekers. Mike.
Jeff Paul, live in Los Angeles. Jeff, thanks a lot.
Basic duties. Pompeo said ignoring the situation has destabilized the region.
This meeting is long overdue, and you all know why it's overdue. Take Carlos Aquino, a 37-year-old construction worker, weeping over the tiny coffin of his deceased infant son who had died of starvation.
The United States and some other 14 countries have recognized Guaido as interim president, but former President Maduro still has support from Russia, China, Cuba, Syria, and Iran. Pompeo said it's no surprise support for Maduro is coming from countries that don't uphold democracy. Russia this morning tried to block the Security Council talks from happening and accused the U.S. of trying to organize a coup d'etat. Venezuela's foreign minister accused European countries of caving to U.S. pressure and tried to convince the Security Council that Maduro's election was legitimate.
Europe is giving us 8 days. 8 days. Where do you get that you have the power to establish a deadline or an ultimatum to a sovereign people? If anything does represent a threat to peace, it is the shameless and aggressive actions of the United States and their allies.
Now, this is all happening as Americans in Venezuela face uncertainty. Earlier this week, Maduro instructed all U.S. diplomatic personnel to leave the country within 72 hours. The United States said we would not comply. Mike?
Jackie Heinrich, live at the UN. Jackie, thank you. A dam collapse kills more than 30 people in southeastern Brazil. Employees of the mining company Vale were eating lunch Friday afternoon when the dam ruptured. The death toll is still rising as rescuers continue to dig through several feet of mud to search for survivors.
It's distressing, maddening. Time is passing. It's been 24 hours already. Time is running. I just don't want to think he's under the mud.
Hundreds of people have been reported missing. Still no word on what caused the collapse. The upper Midwest braces for a dangerously cold winter storm. The region could see record temperatures this weekend with wind chills hitting 40 degrees below zero. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is tracking the Arctic blast in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Mike. Yeah, that is scary to hear, but you know what? That is what's possibly on the way. Certainly colder weather, and it's been cold in this region. These are some of the temperatures we're currently looking at. Just the very beginning of this feels like 1 degree in Chicago, a little bit colder to the north. There are areas where this is going to really settle in, beginning today, but more so in the next couple of days. So think of the middle of next week. Currently, -8 in Green Bay, Fargo, -26. I think a lot more people are going to be feeling like Fargo by Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. We've got a couple of little low-pressure systems moving across the region, one currently, a second one bringing a little bit more snow. This is going to be Sunday night into Monday morning. That's running across Wisconsin, the UP, Michigan, down into portions of Ohio and Indiana. This not a huge snow, largely anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of total precipitation. Not a lot for this particular region, but again, that's something they're going to be dealing with really Monday morning, running through the day into Monday. But what that second system does is grab a whole lot of air, cold air, and bring it down into areas where these temperatures just typically don't see this. Maybe the coldest air we've seen in a decade. Everything you're looking at in the purple area, that's temperatures getting down to zero or colder. Before you know it, it stretches all the way down to the Ohio River, stretching back off across the northern plains. Everything in the blue, that is freezing. So 32 degrees or colder, that's running you down all the way to the Gulf Coast. So portions of Florida, down across Biloxi, over towards New Orleans, all areas that typically, don't get down to freezing. So a huge area, we're talking about some very cold air. These are going to be your early morning temperatures beginning Monday, and you're going to see how they all drop as we continue through this. But from Monday morning into Tuesday morning, suddenly the temperatures get a lot colder. And again, it's a very large area. People waking up 27 degrees in Dallas as a feels-like temperature. Even colder on Wednesday, Chicago, -19 degrees. Down to -20 degrees in Chicago Thursday morning. Mike, I do think there's going to be areas getting down to -30, -40. Wouldn't be surprised if in the Midwest there's some schools canceled because you can't have kids standing outside at the bus stop with those type of temperatures. This really could be some of the coldest air we've seen in close to a decade.
Wow, some stunning numbers and quite chilly in the Super Bowl city of Atlanta too, right, Adam?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, they're not used to seeing waking up temperatures down towards 20. This is a huge national freeze we're going to be seeing.
Wow. Meteorologist Adam Klotz, thanks a lot.
Yep.
With the government now temporarily reopened, it's back to the bargaining table with the clock ticking for lawmakers to come up with a deal on border security. Plus, longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone defiant as he faces a 7-count indictment in connection with the Russia investigation. A look at the case against him and what it means for the president. Longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone out on bail after being arrested in a pre-dawn raid yesterday and indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller in connection with the Russia investigation. Stone is charged with obstruction, making false statements, and witness tampering, allegations he dismisses as a, quote, nothing burger. Jillian Turner has more from our D.C. bureau.
Roger Stone slated to appear for arraignment Tuesday morning at 11 a.m., according to the latest from court officials. He was released on a $250,000 bail yesterday and showing the world he's in a fighting mood.
I will not bend. I will not bear false witness against the president. I intend to fight because this indictment is fabricated. This indictment is thin as can be.
The president reacting this morning with a new tweet, deflecting attention from his longtime friend, saying, if Roger Stone was indicted for lying to Congress, what about the lying done by Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Lisa Page and Lover, Baker, and so many others? What about Hillary to the FBI and her 33,000 deleted emails? What about Lisa and Peter's deleted texts and Weiner's laptop? Much more. While his attorneys sticking to the president's favorite line, no collusion, saying in a statement on the 24-page indictment, quote, it doesn't allege collusion. Now, White House staff has been echoing the message, there's nothing doing.
Look, I'm not an attorney. I haven't read that document. I'm not going to get into things I don't know. What I do know is that this has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the White House.
But the House Speaker is sticking to the old adage that you can tell a lot about people by their friends.
It's very interesting to see the kinds of people that the President of the United States has surrounded himself with. This connection to the integrity of our elections is obviously something we have to get the truth about.
He faces 7 charges, including lying to Congress, witness tampering, and obstructing a congressional investigation. The special counsel has either indicted, convicted, or gotten guilty pleas out of 34 people, 6 of them former Trump advisors, including the president's former attorney, national security advisor, and campaign chairman. Mike?
Jillian Turner, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in former federal prosecutor John Sale. John, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Mike.
How big of a deal, in your view, is this Roger Stone arrest?
It depends upon Roger Stone. Yesterday, Friday, let's look at a day in the life of Roger Stone. He's sleeping peacefully in his house. He's awakened by armed troopers.
Right.
They take him in handcuffs to the courthouse. And what the public doesn't know, I practice in South Florida. Here's how it works. He's not taken right into the courtroom. He's taken into lockup, where he's processed. He's brought into the courtroom in shackles, in handcuffs, and so, but going through all that, I've never seen anybody who isn't a little bit ruffled. He comes out, he doesn't seem ruffled at all. He's defiant. And some of the things he said to a very angry crowd, I don't know how he can ever become a viable witness against the president. He says his lawyers must be tearing their hair out.
Right.
But what he says is, I'm not going to bear false witness. I'm not going to make up lies to incriminate the president. And remember, something that's not said often enough. An indictment is merely a charge.
Sure.
An indictment doesn't necessarily mean that the facts are true. So if he's going to fight this, it'll take a long time, and he'll have a trial, and we'll just have to see.
How alarming do you think this is for people who dealt with Stone during the 2016 campaign?
Well, people have to have some concern, but the real question is, I think, is the president. And I don't think the president has to have any concern from this case, because I agree with Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow. This indictment does not charge collusion. That's not a crime. Does not charge conspiracy. And every alleged act in it took place after Bob Mueller was appointed. So they're what's called process crimes. Not that they're not serious, but they have nothing to do with collusion with the Russians or the underlying substantive offense.
Stone
so again, I'm sorry for repeating, but again, we have to wait to see.
Sure. Stone says he's loyal to the president, won't bear false witness, but might he give up information on others to save his neck?
Well, in order to cooperate, to get a cooperation deal, you can't say to the special counsel or to the Southern District of New York, I'll tell you only about X, Y, and Z, not about the other things. The deal is always you tell us the truth.
Right.
You don't falsely incriminate anyone, but you always tell the truth. And can I say one quick thing about a special counsel, since I was part of the Watergate?
Sure.
If a special counsel does a thorough, complete investigation, and it does not incriminate the president, he has not failed. All everybody should be seeking is the truth, and that's hopefully what his report will demonstrate. Let the chips fall as they may.
Roger Stone's clearly a very colorful character, but is this more trouble than he expected? Listen to how an associate, Jerome Corsi, has described his own experience.
It has made my life, my family's life, my wife, the entire family a nightmare. and days you can't sleep, up days, bad days. This is not America. I was done nothing wrong. I can be convicted of having a bad memory, but I can't be convicted of telling the special counsel or the FBI something I knew to be false to deceive them. It didn't happen.
Your reaction to that, John?
He's saying the same thing. I don't want to say anything to cause anybody any further anxiety or speculation, but he's going to be indicted. I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer. I mean, since he ripped up that plea agreement and publicly leaked it, I mean, there's no question. So, but he has his own situation and his own life to lead and to do whatever's best for him and only tell the truth, as he says.
Some questions have been asked about the tactics going into Stone's house pre-dawn. Was that to make sure Stone did not destroy possible evidence, didn't flee, or was it pure intimidation?
Well, bear in mind, I think it was appropriate, although very scary, government conduct, because they're charging him with obstruction of justice, interfering with witnesses, tampering with witnesses, so there might be some reason to believe he would destroy evidence. So I think, although it's an overzealous tactic, he's not going to flee, he's not dangerous, but I understand why they did that.
All right, former federal prosecutor John Sale, thanks very much, sir.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
A manhunt is now underway after shootings at 2 parishes in Louisiana have left 5 people dead. Authorities say this man, Dakota Terrio, is the prime suspect in the shooting deaths of his parents in Ascension Parish. He's believed to be driving a stolen 2004 Dodge Ram pickup, gray and silver in color. Meantime, investigators say the shooting in Livingston Parish, where 3 people died, and the shooting in Ascension Parish are considered to be related. Iowa Congressman Steve King holds his first public event since getting rebuked by his fellow House Republicans over racist comments printed in the New York Times. We'll tell you what he had to say. Plus, President Trump accused of caving to Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the shutdown standoff. Where things go from here.
This is round 1 of a 12-round bout, maybe 15. This is a very strategic move on the president's part, and I know what he's doing. And this was a good move on his part. He has not capitulated on the wall.
What we need is a win for the American people. I don't know a Democrat or Republican that doesn't want to keep this nation safe. We need to get in the room and talk about how we keep that border safe.
The President of the United States said, okay, Democrats, I'm going to take you at your word. I'm going to trust that you're really willing to negotiate. You got 3 weeks to get it done. And if not, we're going to be back in the same situation.
Here we go. Lawmakers preparing for a whole new round of negotiations on border security after the federal government has temporarily been reopened. I'm Mike Emanuel in for John Scott, and this is the Fox Report, just past the bottom of the hour. And if you're just joining us, the key issue in negotiations will once again be funding for President Trump's border wall. Democrats have remained steadfast in their opposition to it. David Spunt is live in Washington with more. Hi, David.
Hey, Mike, good evening. You know how it works in this beautiful building behind me. Now the clock is really ticking. February 15th. If Congress doesn't come up with a compromise before then, the president says he'll declare a national emergency. But soon 800,000 employees that missed a paycheck for the second time yesterday are breathing a sigh of relief, and they will get paid. But it's not going to happen overnight. Many of these agencies have been shut down since December 21st, and they need some time. Now, the real behind the scenes will work on Capitol Hill as lawmakers try to hammer out a deal that's both satisfying to Democrats and Republicans. Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas doesn't seem too optimistic, though, about a deal with Democrats.
The problem is when you're dealing with leaders in a party who are more concerned about political victories than they are about protecting the country, then you really have a tough time. And then when you've got a Senate that has people that got elected to do nothing as Republicans except make President Trump's life miserable, it's a tough area to navigate.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced Democratic members of a conference committee that will work with Republicans coming to find out a deal. Now, you'll find optimism on both sides of the aisle. Congressman Dan Kildee, a Democrat from Michigan, was on with Neil Cavuto this morning and said this about President Trump's wall request.
Are you open to funding for a wall?
Well, you can call it what you want. We're open and continue to support effective border security, which would include fencing and barriers where appropriate, but also hopefully will focus much more attention on those issues that relate to our ports of entry.
You will start to see things opening soon, though, when it comes to national parks and museums. Now, Mike, we checked with the National Park Service, and we were told that people need to check with specific parks to find out more information about when they'll be open. Sites on the National Mall back here in Washington will be open tomorrow. The National Zoo and Smithsonian Museums will open on Tuesday. A lot of people have been wondering, heading there for vacations, for breaks. They get there, they find out they're closed, so they're looking forward to seeing those open. Mike.
Good news for all the tourists. David, thanks very much.
Thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in Stephen Nelson, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. Stephen, great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So day 35, partial government shutdown has ended. Now what?
That's the question. We have this 3-week period of time during which there could be legislation funding a wall. If that doesn't happen, President Trump's latest is that he will, quote, obviously declare a national emergency. Of course, President Trump has changed his mind on whether or not to declare a national emergency. He has said maybe definitely before, and then said Democrats should vote for the wall. And now yesterday during the Rose Garden address, he said either the government will shut down again in 3 weeks or he will declare an emergency. And then he said obviously he will declare an emergency. That's the latest we have. What actually comes in the next 3 weeks remains to be seen.
3 weeks is not very long when you consider weekends and lawmakers leaving town. Does this fresh memory of the shutdown motivate all the players to get something done on border security?
Well, the Democrats seem to think that they've won here, and in a sense they have won because President Trump has not gotten his wall funds. President Trump, of course, said that he would proudly own the shutdown before. Then there were 1 million people not getting paid. Their families were affected. There was a trickle-down effect. There's a lot of pressure here to get something done. Both sides, they have to walk away with this, not looking bad. And President Trump's easiest way out, it would seem, is a national emergency because wall funds just don't seem to be flying with Democrats.
Democratic leaders on the Hill yesterday seemed pretty happy. They held their ground on the border wall. Take a listen to this, and I'll get your reaction.
We asked the president to open up government so we'd have time to have a debate on the best way to protect our border. Democrats are committed to border security, and we think we have some better ideas about how to do so.
Whatever the time frame, let's hope we've learned the lesson that shutting down government is not an acceptable alternative.
How do you think the folks you cover at the White House will respond to those comments?
Well, there was some remarks that weren't aired just now. There were pretty much jeers from Schumer and Pelosi toward Trump. Schumer saying to Trump he realized it was a lost cause at the wall. And Nancy Pelosi was asked if she would, support wall funds, and she said, have I not been clear? The Democrats have been almost openly antagonistic toward Trump on this. They have, of course, the numbers to block a wall in Congress. And, those numbers have made things pretty difficult for President Trump, leaving few options here.
Stephen, how alarmed do you think folks at the White House were to the reaction from some Republican senators who signaled they were willing to vote yes on anything to reopen the government?
Right. So those votes, are seen as pivotal here. There were 6 Republicans who flaked off on one of the measures in the Senate. Two other Republicans flaked off on another. Up until then, there had been the appearance of real Republican unity. President Trump had said this repeatedly. 8 Republican senators ditching the party line was remarkable, and that is presumably contributing to President Trump's decision yesterday to reopen the government temporarily.
Of course, the one big weapon in President Trump's pocket is declaring it a national emergency. Here's Hogan Gidley on that this morning.
All those options remain on the table. The president has taken nothing off the table. And the fact that he made that point yesterday in the Rose Garden, listen, if worse comes to worse, we are facing a national emergency. He's prepared to announce that and do everything necessary to protect the American people.
Does that happen February 15th without a deal?
Well, that's the latest from President Trump. But of course, President Trump has also been quite clear on why a national emergency is not his first choice. He feels that he'll be sued in the Ninth Circuit and that he will lose there before possible ultimate victory at the Supreme Court. But, he has the memory of the travel ban. It took more than a year for the travel ban to be upheld by the Supreme Court, and in the meantime was put on pause. So if President Trump went the national emergency route, there would not likely be an immediate victory on the wall. The wall would not be built immediately. Things would be complicated, and that's why he hasn't done so yet.
Yeah, some suggesting it could be tied up in the courts for quite a long time, and perhaps the president may lose, and so a lot of questions there. Stephen Nelson, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner, thanks so much for your time. Iowa Congressman Steve King appearing at his first public event since receiving a strong rebuke from House Republican leadership. Lawmakers taking action after King's controversial interview with the New York Times earlier this month. King defending his remarks about white nationalism during a town hall today. Listen.
It is stunning and astonishing to me that 4 words in a New York Times quote can outweigh 20-some years of public service. Not one soul that stood up and said Steve King has ever acted in a racist fashion, that he's ever discriminated against anybody. There's plenty of evidence out there to the contrary.
House Republicans removed Steve King from his positions on the House Judiciary, Agriculture, and Small Business committees. Satellite images suggesting Saudi Arabia could be developing a ballistic missile program. What could this mean for the Middle East? And a posthumous honor for a Medal of Honor recipient who made the ultimate sacrifice.